Grab your tea, America, because the housing reset is happening live on Zillow as we speak. Let's talk about it. I reported back in April that the housing market was starting to soften, but we still had a large amount of markets that were still in the seller's favor, whereas they can list their house and it would sell pretty quickly. But now the tables have turned. We're seeing that buyers' markets have jumped from 338 to 454 major metros out of the 925 that I track. And sellers markets have collapsed from 377 strong sellers markets down to 239. And balance markets have increased. They went from 207 balance markets to 241. So no doubt those markets that used to be with a strong sellers stronghold have moved into buyers markets and more balanced markets. The power shift is so obvious that realtors now have to stop saying, "This won't last long," in the listing descriptions. So with the change in power means more inventory. We're seeing inventory start to pile up in the buyer's turfs. So what that means is that in the buyer's markets that I'm tracking right now, inventory is up 22% year over year. And in balanced markets, it's up 21% year over year. And even sellers markets are starting to see more inventory, and that's up 15% year over year. But what's next for the housing market 2.0 is the rise in foreclosures and bankruptcies that we're starting to see. While they're not yet at any kind of 2008 level, this time it definitely is different. And the numbers that we're starting to see are still concerning. Foreclosure filings are up 6% year over year, and bankruptcy filings are up 11.5%, almost 12% for bankruptcies. And while today's distressed sellers don't look like 2008, there's some things that we need to understand. In 2008, the distressed sellers were underwater borrowers, right? Their houses were worth so much less than what they owed. And so they were stuck begging banks, and it just was this huge foreclosure surge because they couldn't sell their house that they could no longer afford. In 2025, with increasing inflation and bills constantly going up, along with crushing amounts of consumer credit card debt, we're seeing that sellers in 2025 are a lot different because they do have a lot of equity in their house. They just don't have the cash to continue to float paying their bills. So some people are really thinking, like, I need to sell, I need to get out from underneath this mortgage, and I need to go find cheaper housing somewhere. And when they put their house on the market, we're seeing that they are starting to cut more aggressively than the other sellers that are on the market. These are the people that are going to be first to blink when it comes to needing to sell their house in this stalemate of a market that we've had. And price cuts are the only weapon that they really have. They'd rather fire sale than bleed out under the cost of their mortgage or a pending foreclosure. And it's just one of the reasons that we're seeing a lot of price cuts happening in a lot of these major metros. So we're going to see prices drive lower over the next 6 to 12 months, barring any other economic change. So the chain reaction is already in place. So what we're seeing is that inventory is continuing to increase. Active listings are up double digits, over 20% year over year in many markets. And more supply means more competition, which means more price reduction tags. You can go check Zillow. They're happening everywhere. And equity enables faster cuts. So unlike the slow bleed of the 2008 Great Recession housing foreclosure catastrophe, we're seeing that homeowners are willing to cut the prices, and they're starting to happen more over. And that accelerates the downshift instead of just delaying it and having it play out slower. And that pushes the psychology shifts for home buyers. Once buyers see consistent markdowns, their fear of missing out flips to the fear of overpaying. And so that often forces sellers to cut again because buyers now aren't going to be the one to blink. It's going to be the sellers. But the distress across the United States isn't evenly spread. So the states where we're seeing higher numbers of foreclosures and bankruptcies, we're looking at Nevada with the highest foreclosure rate of 1 in every 2,069 housing units. South Carolina is 1 in 2,152. Florida, 1 in 2,500. Texas, Florida, California, they have the biggest volume, but they also have the largest inventory. They're pretty big states with lots of houses. And then we're seeing a few underdogs come up with year over year surges in foreclosures, and that's going to be Alaska, Rhode Island, Wyoming, Utah, and Colorado. So it's time to start watching these markets because the pain isn't just in the Sun Belt anymore. We've always been talking about like Florida and Texas and all of those areas where we're starting to see prices come down, but it's starting to go full systemic, and the United States is starting to feel it. The other markets that we're going to want to track for like lots of price cuts, and these are the markets where you can watch this live on Zillow, is going to be Denver, Colorado, Portland, Oregon, Jacksonville, Florida. Pretty much all of Florida continues. Indianapolis, Indiana is interesting because it's been one of the more stable sellers markets, but we're starting to see more price cuts come in and days on market start to increase. And then Austin, Texas, of course, a lot of the markets in Texas. So between April and August, the housing market has definitely flipped. Sellers lost 138 metros and buyers gained 116. Foreclosures are quietly rising, bankruptcies are piling up, and the front line of distress isn't the banks, it's the sellers themselves. So forget about those courthouse auctions right now. The distressed sales of 2025 are happening live on Zillow with the red price reduced tags.